Hello, welcome back to another one of our videos, and this is the last of our series of functional patterns, how to improve them. And this one we're looking at rotation or the twisting pattern. So this one here, like with all of them, we start off with addressing any mobility restrictions that may limit you from being able to complete the pattern. And this first one is looking at the thoracic mobility, which is very important because the thoracic region's primary purpose is to provide mobility, either in extension or in this case rotation. So this first part we're doing where we've got the hand behind the back and looking at getting good rotation as you're sort of like rotating your rib cage around to the side. Most people will find this one a lot easier than the second one. However, some people may find this one quite hard to do. Alright, so treat these like tests. So if they're difficult to do, the test itself becomes a great exercise. So once you've moved away from the first part with the hand behind the back, then we look at the one with the hand beside the head. And in both cases with these, where you're trying to aim to reach is that basically that 180 degrees. So you should be able to get vertical with that elbow. So 180 degrees being that. Alright, so what needs to happen is that part of your thoracic spine, so in this case if I just take it back a bit, and you'll see it's the top part here which is around near the scapula and the neck. This is why a lot of people really struggle with this one more so than the previous one, is because there's so much limitation, so much stiffness. This is really good mobility you can see here, and when I come around to the side I'll be able to show you. So on the other one with the hand behind the back, try and think there's like 4 quadrants. So the bottom ones that we did before are there, and then these last 2 that we're doing now are here. So out of these 4 areas, wherever you're stiff is where you might need to work. So let's say, for example, you had a problem at there, you would stick with that drill with the left hand behind the back, and that would be the one you would need the most. If you stiffen all 4 of them, then you do all 4. But they're really handy sort of a test to gauge where you need to work on. Now, in addition to the thoracic, the other key part of providing rotation for the body is the hips. Now, really I could give you a ton of exercises here. There's so many of them. There's no real one that's better than the other. You just find the one that's right for you, and at nearly every one of these patterns of videos you'll find there's some element of this in there, just because it's such a problem area. So this is the 90-90 stretch that we've done several times now, and basically you're just getting your legs in this 90-90 position and then trying to bend forward. So and what it's trying to do is release stiffness that's usually around the posterior part of the hip there, that greatly limits your ability to rotate. And if you're feeling good, you can sort of bend forward as Mel was doing it just in that case. So again, I could use foam rolling, I could use other type of glute stretches, or try to release the hip itself. I could use up all 10 of our exercises just showing you those. All right. Now, once I've addressed my hip thing, and you could use many other versions like I just explained, I'll move to one that's more of another moving type drill. And this is quite a handy one. It's probably less aggressive than the previous 2. So especially for the person in a lot of pain, this can be quite an effective drill to help them free themselves up without trying to force anything. So again, what you need to do is set up in that position where you got this 90 degrees angle at the hip here, and ideally probably have your feet there as well, but it doesn't matter too much as long as you get this 90 degree hip angle, and then the hands stacked upon each other like this. All right, and then when you very slowly you slide that hand along. Now when it gets to here, I might often use this hand to grab the side of the head to actually help the head rotate. I'm actually trying to get rotation with the least amount of effort. That's the purpose of this drill. It's trying to use such little effort to rotate so that when I get around to here, I should be able to have this shoulder pinned to the floor, so I'm pretty much opened right out. So this is where the pecs have to be really fully released, so they have to open up, but the rib cage itself had to rotate. All right, and the hips couldn't help it because you've locked them up. All right, so you keep the hips, the knees tucked together, and this hip stuck in flexion. It's really picking on that thoracic spine, but in a very simplistic and minimal type of way of moving it. All right, so very handy drill, this one. A lot of people underestimate the power of this, but can be really good, especially if you have neck pain and associated shoulder pain that comes with it. Also, like the previous one that we saw at the beginning, this can be an effective form of a test. You can really observe the difference between the two sides, and you can see this where maybe pec tightness might be at play. Also maybe hip things that come up in this as well. But a very handy drill preparing you for the harder, more strength-based movements to come. And you can see in this case our Mel doesn't appear to rotate her head as far as the other side. Doesn't feel pain necessarily, but a definite noticeable restriction. And you'll see when I come around with the camera on the other side just how far away her shoulder is from the floor, where the other side we had it flat on the floor. And this really comes back to, really for her, a real stiffness through that left hip that's just really greatly limiting her ability to rotate. See how high off the ground this left shoulder is compared to what the other side was? So this part here, I could fit my entire fist under there. But the other side, she had her rib cage came around that bit further, and this was right on the floor and opened right out. All right, so she would work on this drill more so facing this way than what she did the first time. All right, so like with all the other patterns, all these exercises, these drills of mobility can be used in between the sets of the strength ones that we're about to show you, because they really help to free up areas of restriction that are limiting you from doing it correctly. Now this first exercise, funnily enough, is probably an anti-rotation drill, and it's actually learning to control rotation instead of trying to enhance it. And it's very important to understand that, because a lot of people don't control it very well and end up causing all problems through their spine. So this first one here, the key is to keep this leg and the spine here dead straight, like you're lining up against the wall. And where we will often see people with mistakes is this is where we see the lateral pelvic tilt, where they'll tilt the hip out to the side. They actually feel stronger doing it, but really what they're doing is they're using their hip and their spine to create the rotation, and not through the obliques, which should be providing it. So you can see why we call this drill anti-rotation. Now, a lot harder to control with the legs in this position. So if someone's struggling, then I'll actually move them into a more stable position, where now it's easier for them to stay in that position. The only problem with this is it reduces the range of motion. So they have a limited capacity to move. They're much more stable, but you want to actually sort of enhance the full range, but with the most control. Once you've been able to execute this half kneeling position, then you're pretty much ready to go to the standing position. And the standing position is where we begin to see the legs really become heavily involved. You can play with the height of the cables here. Mel's just adjusting it to be higher, and she's putting a little bit more load on it, just because she'll have a better feel with the exercise this way. All right, so with this high to low wood chop, this is the one that gives you the best leverage, and you really need, as I said several times, the legs really need to be a key player here, especially this left leg. This left leg is everything. This is where the power is coming from. It's not coming from the obliques. The power is being integrated through the foot and right up through the kinetic chain into the rib cage, so that when she gets to that point there, the obliques have got so much momentum they can really drive the force through without having to use the spine or anything to do so. All right, so the legs are the key in this movement. You can see why hip mobility is now a real factor, because if you're stiff in this position from adductor tightness or just general hip stiffness in general, you're going to really compromise this movement in a big way. All right. The other thing is the hands have to be quite a fair way in front of you. You can see how she makes like a good V sort of with her arms like that. So the other compensation we'll see is people bending their arms too much and actually trying to push it across. They're trying to bring the cable closer to them to reduce the lever on them, which makes them stronger, but it really means they don't rotate at all. Now, once you've got the high to low one, then you move to the low to high. low to high significantly harder, and you'll see me, I'll put the weight down on this one. Even though it's lighter, it actually feels a lot heavier. It's sort of the cable's working like a form of gravity, like a barbell or a dumbbell in this case as well. So now the legs become even more important because you have to really drive. There's no leverage on the cable now. You really have to create the momentum from the ground up. The hands, again, are the same as before. You see how they have that little V? And then you've got to really push up through the legs to drive it up this way. And you'll notice that when she gets to the top of the movement, how her foot will actually come right up onto the toes here, which we didn't see in the other one, but it's very important on this one because without this triple extension here, she'll have like an energy leak, and that energy leak becomes a real problem when we move to the next ones, being with medicine balls, because it should happen automatically, but if you've got this dysfunction, it won't happen at all. All right, so that's the low to high one. A very, very exhausting exercise, this one. Again, I'll be very careful of doing this one with anyone with back pain. If anyone has back pain, because just this point here where you're getting into there, where they've got to bend over and rotating at the same time, can be a little bit of a problem. All right. So now that we've got all the mobility and strength-based ones, now we can move into the real meat of the rotation, which is when it has power. Out of all of the movements, this one really relies heavily on fast timing. All these strength ones of the cable, by the way, besides maybe the half kneeling one, they really need to be done at a fast speed. You can't do them at slow speeds and do them correctly. They must be done at high speed. This is where we see Pilates doing things with really slow rotation. That's really putting a lot of stress into the spine. And without the legs, again, it's all just going straight into the spine. The obliques are not meant to work on their own like that. They really need the legs to instigate all of the movement or it goes wrong. All right, so let's look at these medicine ball ones. Okay, so with the medicine balls, like really there's hundreds of these, there's so many of them, it's really hard to just limit. I'm just going to keep it to the two simple ones. So this is just a basic one using a ball against the wall, a bit like what I spoke about with a cable. Just the ball moves faster, it just encourages more speed. But again, there's that weight shift applies, so you can see how the legs loaded right up to provide all of the power initiation coming from the leg so that she can throw the ball fast enough into the wall. This is the thing, if she doesn't throw it fast enough, the ball will go up like a lollipop and then it'll hit the floor. For it to come back at her on the floor, she has to throw it fast enough so it'll hit it hard enough and come back at the same angle. All right, this is the beauty of the medicine balls, that they really encourage that. Now, once you've got the hang of catching it on the floor, you can move to a lot more power, where now you can really get even more out of it, really throw it harder so that it actually does bounce back at you on the full. Again, you see the weight shift of the legs really having to provide massive power acceleration to be able to keep that ball from ending up like a lollipop. All right, so you can see here, that's where you get the most out of these exercises. Like I said before, I could show you hundreds of different versions of these. Lighter balls are better than heavy balls, by the way, because you can move them faster. If I want to have a strength-based focus to it, I'll do this next exercise that I'm about to show you. But I probably prefer them lighter and moving faster. They just work better for this particular pattern. It's sort of strength is not really the focus, it's more about the speed, that is. All right, so let's look at the next one, which is a bit of a different variation of this. All right, so this rotation exercise is where we bring in a barbell into it. All right, so the danger of this is you can go too heavy with the barbell. And like I've said just before with the medicine ball, if you go too heavy, you ruin the timing of the pattern. I'll bring in a stepping action with this, so we'll watch me do a couple here. I'll actually bring in a stepping to the other side. So it's a bit of an agility exercise in some regards. And this is in slow motion, but you really want to get it quite quick and jumping from side to side and getting that full rotation with the barbell. Quite a handy way to get some agility involved. And you can see here that V shape that we saw in the cable ones before. Same thing, it's just a different stance, very much like a lunge stance, and that back leg curling around. And just like I said, just bringing in a bit of an agility component. And again, with the barbell, loaded up in a different way. It's not really, because you've got to remember all these barbells and dumbbells, the way the resistance works is they're trying to head towards the floor, where the cable we can manipulate the resistance coming diagonally, like with that low to high going that way, and even so we're coming through all these spirals that hit all the obliques in different angles. This is just a different one, very much more of a strength focus. Probably feel it more on the legs than anything. All right, but another variation of the rotation that's a little bit more advanced. All right, so let's look at the last one. Okay, so this last one's basically another medicine ball one, but called a tornado ball. Actually, in some ways it's quite simple, but you have to be explosive on this. You just cannot be slow at all, or else it won't work at all. So watch Nathan do this one. This where you really got to be, you'll see his face and even how much effort he has to use to keep this ball moving like really, really fast from side to side. We'll go back and break it down for you. So when you're doing this one, you'll see here when that ball's moving, see, to keep this rope really tight like that, and that ball, because remember gravity wants that ball to drop. All right, that's a 5 kilo, I think a 3 or 5 kilo ball. It wants to get to the ground. The only way to keep this up in the air and that far away from you is with speed. And that's what I was saying, he has to be so fast, be able to keep this ball sitting horizontally in the air like it is. And you'll see how tight that rope is. See, for that rope to stay tight, I have to have speed on the ball. And you watch how his hips move side to side. See how he has to have that hip rotation. See that? How he has to have that, because without that he won't be able to get that drive off this leg to instantaneously come back. Where a lot of people make mistakes on this is they fall forward with their momentum of the ball, the inertia of it sort of pulls them forward. That's where they have to have their hips sitting back, staying quite low. If they stand up too tall, they won't be able to do it right, and it all goes bad really fast. Probably the other mistake we often see is the hands too far apart. Nathan's probably a little bit. You can see they should be touching, just like how, because it gets more leverage on the rope here. The better the leverage, the better it works. All right. So this is a really, it's quite simple in many ways, but it's actually very advanced in many other ways. The one thing that most people lack is power, and this one really takes it to its limit, and you just can't. If you're just not fast enough, it just doesn't work. You can't cheat on it, more or less. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, so a great one to sort of finish off with within the rotation side of things. It really gives you a really good look at how that works. And so you have to really see this one in slow motion to see just how much the rope, how fast you have to be to keep that rope like that. All right, so that finishes our rotation and our patterns videos. I hope you've enjoyed that. Make sure to check the description below, because there's heaps of links that give you additional information on what to do in all these various movements. All right, we'll see you again on the next one.